4 minutes before my retirement ceremony began, I looked at the white card, resting on the empty chair beside mine. Matthew Callahan Family Remarks. My son had promised he would be sitting there. Instead, 2 rows behind that untouched chair, Noah Reyes, the son of my late best friend, was kneeling beside a nervous 17-year-old apprentice, helping him steady a display panel with shaking hands. "Take your time," Noah told him. "Nobody here is grading how fast you tighten one screw." My son was nowhere in the building. Noah had arrived 40 minutes early. I slipped one hand into my jacket pocket and touched the brass key I carried. It belonged to the first electrical workshop I ever supervised, and I had planned to place it in Matthew's hand after his speech. Before I tell you why my son left that chair empty, let me know where in the world you're listening from. Make yourself comfortable. Take a deep breath, relax, and stay with me, because what happened that afternoon changed the way I understood family loyalty and the quiet cost of always being the parent who understands. My name is Thomas Callahan. I was 68 years old, and after 42 years with Milwaukee's public transit system that day, was meant to be the proudest of my working life. It was also the opening of a training center I had spent 8 years helping build, where young people could learn a trade and begin again without drowning in debt. Matthew had promised to stand beside me. The night before, he called and said an unexpected company retreat had come up. I believed him. But after the ceremony, the deputy director led me into a private office and placed a printed email on the table. It was from Matthew. He had known about the retreat for 9 days. Worse, he had asked whether the unpaid community role I intended to offer him could be turned into a paid consulting contract for his firm. That was when I understood the empty chair was not the betrayal. It was only the first sign of it. To understand why that empty chair hurt as much as it did, you have to understand what the day was supposed to mean. I had worked for Milwaukee's public transit system for 42 years, beginning as an 18-year-old apprentice who barely knew the difference between a breaker panel and a junction box. Over time, I moved from maintenance bays to supervisory offices, but I never stopped believing that skilled work mattered most when it gave someone else a chance to build a steady life. That belief was why I had spent the last 8 years helping create the South Harbor Apprenticeship Center. The program would train young people in electrical systems, welding, vehicle diagnostics, and industrial maintenance while paying them during their placements. Some of the first students had been rejected by colleges. Others were single parents veterans, or teenagers who had spent years hearing that they were not smart enough to succeed. I knew how dangerous that kind of message could become when a young person heard it often enough. My own father had loaded freight at night, and my mother cleaned office buildings after dark. They could not explain electrical theory, but they taught me that work done with care could change a family's future. I wanted the center to pass that lesson forward. Retirement itself did not frighten me. What frightened me was becoming unnecessary. The center gave me a reason to believe my experience would still matter after my name disappeared from the weekly schedule. Matthew knew how important the project was to me. At least I believed he did. 3 months earlier, I had driven to his house with the formal invitation tucked inside my jacket. He read the first page twice, then looked up with a smile. 42 years, Dad. That's incredible. I told him the ceremony would also mark the center's official opening and that the organizers wanted one family member to speak. They asked me who I wanted, I said. I gave them your name. His expression softened. I'd be honored. I asked whether he was certain, because his work kept him busy, and I did not want a promise made out of guilt. He hugged me and said I wouldn't miss it. I believed him, because fathers often keep believing their children long after experience tells them to be careful. What Matthew did not know was that I had recommended him for a volunteer position on the center's Community Advisory Council. He understood budgets, business partnerships, and the language corporate sponsors expected to hear. I understood machines and apprentices. Together, I thought we might finally build something that belonged to both of us. I also planned to give him the old brass key from the first workshop I had supervised. The lock it once opened had been replaced years earlier, but the key still meant trust to me. My late wife, Claire, used to say that a key was only valuable when you knew what you were being invited to protect. I had bought a new tie for the occasion, rehearsed a short speech, and even cleaned the truck, because Claire used to say, important days deserved small signs of respect. For once, I allowed myself to imagine Matthew standing beside me while the center opened its doors. On the evening before the ceremony, I placed the key on the kitchen table and polished away decades of grime. At 7:12, my phone rang. Matthew's name appeared on the screen. I answered with a smile, expecting him to ask what time he should arrive. Instead, he said, "Dad, there's been a change of plans." "What kind of change?" I asked. Matthew hesitated long enough for me to hear that he had rehearsed the answer. "The senior partners moved our leadership retreat to Door County. They want me there for the final presentation." I looked at the brass key on the table. "Tomorrow, yes. My ceremony is tomorrow." "I know, Dad." I waited for him to say he would arrive late, leave early, or find some way to do both. Instead, he said, "This account could decide who makes partner next year." "Do you have to attend?" A longer silence followed. "Not technically." The honesty of that answer hurt more than an excuse would have. "Then you are choosing to attend. Please don't make it sound like that. How should I make it sound like I'm trying to protect my career?" In the background, I heard Grace say Matthew tell him the whole situation. Her voice was firm, not cruel. He answered her too quietly for me to understand, then returned to the call. "We've both been under pressure. If this presentation goes well, it could change things for us." "I understand." Relief entered his voice so quickly that it told me how much he had feared my disappointment and how little he expected me to express it. "We'll celebrate next weekend," he said. Grace found a steakhouse near the lake. "Anywhere you want. My treat." I turned the key between my fingers. I wasn't asking for a steak. I know. I'm saying we'll do something proper. The ceremony is the proper celebration, Matthew. He went quiet. I nearly told him about the advisory council. I nearly explained that Martha Chen planned to introduce him after my speech, and that I had spent months telling the board his business experience could help the center survive. I nearly told him the key was meant for him, not because he had followed my profession, but because I wanted us to build something together after retirement. Instead, I waited for him to understand what I had never clearly said. "Are you angry?" he asked. No. That was true. I was hurt, but hurt is not always anger. "Good," he said softly. "I knew you'd understand." The sentence remained in the kitchen after the call ended. "I knew you'd understand." For years, those words had sounded like praise. "Dad will understand if we leave Sunday dinner early. Dad will understand if Christmas happens 3 days later. Dad will understand if another month passes without a visit." The problem with always being the understanding parent is that people eventually stop asking what their choices cost you. Claire had warned me about that. "Patience is kind," she once said, "but silence can become permission." She had been gone 6 years, taken by a ruptured brain aneurysm, so suddenly that our last conversation had been about cabinet handles. There had been no final speech, only ordinary truths I kept remembering too late. Twice that night I picked up my phone to call Matthew back and tell him how much his absence would hurt. Twice I set it down. I told myself I was protecting our relationship. In truth, I was afraid that asking my son to choose me would reveal that he already had not. The next morning at 8:03, Noah Reyes sent me a message, already at the center. One display table is wobbling, and the coffee tastes like radiator water. Everything appears normal. I laughed despite myself. Noah had no idea Matthew had canceled. I decided not to tell him by text. Some disappointments deserved to be spoken aloud. I reached the South Harbor Apprenticeship Center just after 9. Noah was already in the lobby, one hand bracing a folding table, while 2 students adjusted a metal frame beneath it. "You are supposed to be a guest," I told him. He glanced at the table, then at me. "So are you, but apparently neither of us understands retirement." His smile faded when he noticed mine did not last. "Is Matthew parking?" "He isn't coming." Noah straightened. "What happened?" "A work retreat." He studied my face, but he did not criticize my son or ask whether I wanted him to take Matthew's place. He simply said, "I'm sorry." That restraint mattered. Noah understood that disappointment becomes heavier when someone immediately turns it into anger for you. "Do you want me nearby?" he asked. "You already are." 40 minutes later, the auditorium filled with mechanics, electricians, instructors, retirees, apprentices, spouses, and children promised cake after the speeches. Noah took the chair, marked Ria's family. Matthew's chair remained beside mine untouched, his name visible on the white card. Dana, the event coordinator, quietly asked whether I wanted it removed. "Leave it," I said. I was not trying to shame Matthew. I simply could not pretend he had been delayed by traffic. When the lights dimmed, a short video showed photographs from my first years in the maintenance bays, then images of the center taking shape from an abandoned warehouse. Several people spoke about my career, but the words that stayed with me came from a former apprentice named Marcus. "Tom never fixed a problem for you if he believed you could solve it," he told the audience. "He stayed close enough that you would not fail, alone." I looked at the empty chair and wondered whether I had done that for my own son. When I reached the microphone, I left my prepared speech folded inside my jacket. "Skilled work is a form of trust," I said. "Every time someone boards a bus, enters a building, or turns on a machine, they trust that somebody did the job correctly when no one was watching. This center is not here to create perfect workers. It is here to create responsible ones. People who ask questions, admit mistakes, and show up when others are counting on them." My eyes moved toward Matthew's chair before I could stop them. I did not say his name. I thanked Luis instead. A photograph of us as young apprentices appeared behind me, both covered in grease beside an old diesel bus. "Luis Reyes taught me that knowledge matters only when you pass it forward," I said. Noah lowered his head. Afterward, Isaiah, the nervous 17-year-old from the lobby, froze halfway through his demonstration. Noah did not rush onto the floor or take over. He tapped 2 fingers against his wrist, reminding the boy to slow down. Isaiah breathed, began again, and finished to warm applause. Watching Noah smile, I understood that he had not shown up only for me. Showing up was simply how he lived. As the reception began, Martha Chen approached and asked me to follow her into a small conference room. She closed the door, placed a blue folder on the table, and said, "Tom, before we announce the advisory council, you need to see this." Inside was an email from Matthew, written 9 days earlier. He had asked whether the unpaid role I planned to offer him could be converted into a paid consulting contract through his firm. Near the bottom, one sentence, stopped me cold. My father supports the arrangement. The sentence sat on the page like something heavier than ink. My father supports the arrangement. I read it once, then again, searching for some qualification I had missed, some phrase that made it less false. There was none. Martha remained quiet while I lowered myself into the chair, across from her desk. "Did Matthew ever tell you I had approved this?" I asked. "Not directly," she said, "but he spoke as though the two of you had discussed it. He said the consulting proposal would give the center stronger financial oversight and better access to corporate sponsors. And what did you tell him? That the council role was unpaid, that all contracts required a competitive review, and that using a family connection would create a conflict we would need to disclose." I looked through the remaining pages. Matthew had attached a polished presentation from his firm, complete with fee estimates, projected savings, and a photograph of me standing beside the center's unfinished entrance. I had never seen the presentation. I had never given permission for my name or photograph to appear in it. "Has anyone outside this room seen these?" I asked. "2 board members and our legal counsel. No public announcement has been made." "Good." Martha watched me carefully. "Do you want me to remove Matthew from consideration?" The answer would have been easy if I wanted revenge. One call from her could have closed the door before he even knew it had been open. But I had spent 42 years teaching apprentices not to shut down a system before they understood the fault. Pause. "Everything connected to him," I said. "Do not announce his name. Do not share the proposal, and do not contact his firm until I speak with him. You are protecting him. I am protecting the center." I looked at the email again, and I am giving my son one chance to tell me the truth before other people decide what kind of man he is. Martha nodded, though concern remained in her eyes. "Tom, this is not only about missing your ceremony, I know. Missing the ceremony had hurt. This was different. Matthew had used the trust people placed in me as though it belonged to him automatically. The proposal itself was not criminal, and parts of it might even have been useful. The problem was that he had tried to create agreement by implying I had already given it. That could damage the center before its first class began. I asked Martha to print the full email chain and place it in a sealed folder. I did not want copies circulating, and I did not want anyone at the reception whispering about my son. Before leaving the room, I asked one final question. Why did he think I would support this without asking me? Martha hesitated. Maybe because he believed you always would. Her answer followed me back into the auditorium. People shook my hand, posed for photographs, and thanked me for the center, but I barely heard them. For years I had considered unconditional support one of my greatest strengths as a father. For the first time, I wondered whether Matthew had learned to see it as guaranteed access. When Noah approached carrying 2 paper plates of cake, I forced a smile. He handed me one and said, "Whatever is wrong, you do not have to explain it here." I looked toward Matthew's empty chair and realized Noah was right. I would not expose my son in public, but I would no longer protect him from the truth in private. I left the reception carrying the sealed folder beneath my arm, but I did not drive home immediately. Instead, I sat in my truck and watched families cross the parking lot. Parents posed beside apprentices. Children tugged at sleeves and asked for cake. Noah stood near the entrance, helping Isaiah load the diagnostic panel into a van. He noticed me through the windshield, but did not come over until the others had gone. "Need company?" he asked. I unlocked the passenger door. He climbed in, holding his suit jacket over one shoulder. For a while, neither of us spoke. Then he looked at the folder. "Matthew partly." He nodded, accepting the limit without pressing. That was how his father had been too. Luis Reyes and I met on our first day as apprentices, both too proud to admit we were terrified. He had a crooked borrowed tie and a habit of laughing whenever a supervisor raised his voice. Over the years, we worked night shifts, snow emergencies, electrical fires, and more missed holidays than either of our wives deserved. People later liked to tell one story about Luis pulling me away from a damaged power cabinet after a breaker failed. It was true, but it was not why he became my brother. Friendship is rarely built in one dramatic moment. It is built through thousands of ordinary ones, sharing tools, covering shifts, waiting outside hospitals, and showing up when no one is applauding. Luis died 14 years earlier, from a heart attack at 58. There was no final request from a deathbed. 2 weeks before he died, we had been sitting in his garage, repairing a lawnmower, when he said almost casually, "If anything happens to me, keep an eye on Noah." Not his wallet, him. I had laughed and told him he was being morbid. After the funeral, those words became a promise. Noah was 22, grieving, angry, and determined to need nobody. I offered money once. He refused it. So I found quieter ways to stay near. I attended his graduation, helped him move into his first apartment, and listened when he left an engineering job that paid well, but made him miserable. When he decided to teach industrial technology, I worried he was throwing away opportunities. He proved instead that he was creating them for other people. The relationship was never one-sided. After Claire died, Noah began stopping by every few weeks. Sometimes he repaired a loose railing or checked the furnace. Sometimes he brought dinner and sat without forcing conversation. He never called himself my son, and I never asked him to. Matthew was my son. Noah was the child of a promise that had grown into family through time. "Are you sure Matthew knew what today meant?" Noah asked quietly. I thought he did. That is not what I asked. I looked at him. "What are you saying?" "You talk about the center easily. You talk about the work. But when something matters personally, you make people guess." The observation stung because it sounded like Claire. I looked down at the brass key in my palm. I told him I needed him there. "Maybe he heard an invitation," Noah said. "You meant something closer to a plea." I wanted to defend myself, but the sealed folder made that difficult. Matthew had lied. That remained his responsibility. Still, perhaps the distance between us had been built from more than one direction. Noah opened the door, then paused. "Before you decide what this means, ask what happened before you tell him who he has become." Matthew and Grace arrived at my house shortly after 7 the next evening. I had asked them to come without stopping at the center and without calling Martha first. I wanted the truth before explanations began changing shape. Matthew entered carrying the same leather briefcase he used for client meetings. Grace followed more slowly, her expression already tense. I led them into the dining room, where the sealed folder waited beside the brass key. "Sit down," I said. Matthew remained standing. "Dad, before you say anything, I need you to understand how much pressure I'm under." "I understand pressure. This isn't the same." "Then explain it." He glanced at Grace, then set his briefcase on the floor. "My firm has lost 2 major accounts this year. The partners are deciding who stays on the leadership track. If I had skipped that retreat, I would have looked uncommitted. So you lied to me." "I didn't lie." I opened the folder and slid the email across the table. His face changed when he saw the date. Grace leaned toward it. "What is that?" Matthew did not answer. "It is the proposal he sent Martha 9 days ago," I said. "The one that says I support turning an unpaid advisory position into a paid contract for his firm." Grace looked at him. You told me Tom had already agreed. I said he was supportive of the center using professional help. That is not the same thing, she replied. Matthew rubbed both hands over his face. I was going to talk to you after the retreat, after your company had already presented my name to potential sponsors. He looked up sharply. Nothing was final. You wrote that I supported the arrangement, because I believed you would. Belief is not permission. The room went quiet. I could hear the refrigerator motor cycling in the kitchen. Grace folded her arms, but her anger was directed at Matthew, not me. You told me the retreat came together this week, she said. It did change this week. The schedule changed, I said. Your decision did not. Matthew pushed the email away. You're making this sound worse than it is. The center needs funding. My firm knows how to secure it. I was trying to help. Then why hide the proposal? He had no answer ready. I did not raise my voice. Missing the ceremony hurt me. Using my name without asking threatens something larger than either of us. Grace turned toward him. Why didn't you just tell your father? Matthew's jaw tightened. Because he would have said no. You never asked, I said. I didn't need to. He looked at the brass key between us. I know how this works. Noah gives up a better-paying job to teach, and everyone calls him noble. I build a career, and somehow that makes me selfish. This is not about Noah. It is always about Noah. His voice finally rose. Every time you talk about loyalty, he is the example. Every time you talk about character, you mention Luis and Noah. Do you know what it was like growing up beside a dead man's perfect son? The accusation stunned me, because I had never thought of Noah that way. For years I had praised one young man's choices, without noticing that my own son might hear every compliment as a verdict against him. Matthew stood, his eyes wet, but angry. You say you wanted me beside you, but you never wanted me as I am. You wanted someone more like you. Matthew's words stayed with me after he and Grace left. You wanted someone more like you. At first I rejected the accusation. I had never asked him to become an electrician, never demanded that he work for the transit authority, and never told him his career mattered less than Noah's. But honesty becomes harder when you stop measuring only your intentions and begin measuring what another person actually received. I walked through the house after midnight, passing photographs that had always proved in my mind that I had been a devoted father. Matthew at 8, holding a baseball glove. Matthew at 16, beside his first car. Matthew at college graduation, with Claire between us. What the photographs did not show were the games I missed because a winter storm had shut down half the bus fleet. The school concert I arrived at, after the final song, or the evening he called from college, frightened about failing an accounting course, and I answered by offering to pay for a tutor. I had solved problems because solving things was how I loved people. Claire understood that, but she also understood what I did not. A child can appreciate sacrifice and still need to hear that his father is proud of who he has become. When Matthew chose business school, I said it was practical. When he earned his first promotion, I asked whether the new title came with better health insurance. When he bought his house, I inspected the electrical panel before I congratulated him. I had been present, but not always reachable. I also remembered how often Matthew had tried to speak in the language he knew. He sent me articles about transportation funding, offered to review the center's budget, and once asked whether I wanted help creating a donor presentation. I thanked him, then said I already had people handling it. Perhaps he had heard rejection, where I meant efficiency. Then there was Noah. I had never compared them directly, yet I often praised Noah's teaching patience and loyalty in Matthew's presence. I spoke about Luis as though every lesson worth remembering had come from our friendship. Matthew may have heard something I never intended, that another man's son carried the values I wished my own son had. That did not excuse his lie, his use of my name, or his decision to skip the ceremony. But if I expected him to take responsibility, I had to do the same. The next morning, I called Grace first. "Is he with you?" I asked. "No. He slept at a hotel near the office." Her voice sounded tired. "He thinks you chose Noah years ago. I didn't." "Then tell him that. And tell him the rest too." I asked what she meant. "Tell him you are proud of him without attaching a lesson." I sat with that after we ended the call. At noon, I sent Matthew a message asking him to return that evening alone. He did not reply for nearly an hour. Then one word appeared: "Fine." Before he arrived, I placed the sealed folder on the dining table. Beside it, I set the brass key. I was not offering it to him, and I was not using it as punishment. I wanted the truth between us to be visible. When Matthew entered, he looked at the key before he looked at me. "Is this where you tell me I've lost everything?" he asked. "No," I said. "This is where I tell you what I did wrong, and then you decide whether you are ready to do the same." Matthew remained standing for several seconds, then pulled out the chair across from me. "Fine," he said. "What did you do wrong?" I rested both hands on the table. "I spent years assuming that providing for you was the same as knowing you. I solved problems, paid bills, fixed things, and called that love, because it was easier than saying what I felt. I praised Noah for qualities I valued, and never considered how often you heard those words as a comparison. I was proud of you, Matthew. I should have told you that more clearly." His expression shifted, but he did not look away. "Then why did it always feel like he was the son you respected? Because Noah chose a life I understood. You chose one I did not. That was my limitation, not your failure." The admission seemed to take some of the fight out of him. I continued before either of us could retreat into silence. "Now it is your turn." He looked toward the folder. "You want me to apologize. I want you to repair what you did." I slid a sheet of paper across the table. I had written 4 steps, nothing dramatic and nothing hidden. First, Matthew would withdraw his firm's proposal and tell Martha in writing that I had never approved it. Second, he would inform his senior partners that he had used my name without permission. Third, if he still wanted to serve the center, he would spend 12 weeks volunteering without a title contract or promise of appointment. Fourth, after those 12 weeks, the advisory council could decide whether he had earned consideration. I would not participate in that vote. Matthew read the page twice. "You want me to damage my own career? No. I want you to stop protecting it with someone else's reputation. If I tell the partners, I could lose the promotion. That consequence belongs to the choice you made, not to me." His eyes moved to the brass key. "And if I do all this, I get that no." He gave a bitter laugh. "Then what exactly am I earning? The chance to become trustworthy again." The answer angered him more than I expected. He stood and pushed the chair back. "You still do not understand. Noah gets to be noble because he never had to compete in my world. He teaches, helps kids, fixes things, and everyone applauds. I make one bad decision under pressure, and suddenly I am on trial." Before I could respond, the front door opened. Grace stepped into the dining room. "You left your phone in my car," she said, holding it out. Matthew stared at her. "I asked you not to come. I know." She placed the phone on the table, then looked at the paper. "What is he asking?" Matthew handed it to her. She read it carefully. "This is reasonable." "Of course you think that." I think you should have told him the truth the first time. Matthew turned away. Grace looked at me. There is something else you both need to know. I told Matthew not to use your name without written permission. He said he had it handled. Matthew faced her sharply. Grace. No. You have blamed your father Noah, the firm, and me. This part is yours. His phone began ringing on the table. The screen showed his managing partner's name. Matthew stared at it, while the sound filled the room. They are presenting the proposal tomorrow morning, Grace said. If you are going to stop it, this is your last chance. Matthew let the phone ring 3 times before answering. David, he said, trying to steady his voice. He listened, then glanced at Grace and me. Yes, I know the presentation is tomorrow. Another pause. No, I cannot confirm that my father approved it. His managing partner's voice was loud enough that I could hear the sharp change in tone, though not every word. Matthew closed his eyes. Because he did not approve it. I used his name before I had permission. Grace sat down slowly. I stayed silent. This was the part no apology could perform for him. I understand what that means, Matthew said. Withdraw the proposal. Remove my father's photograph, his quotes, and every reference to his support. The voice on the other end grew louder. Matthew's fingers tightened around the phone. No, I am not asking you to protect me. I am correcting the record. He listened for nearly a minute, then said, Send me the written notice. I will respond tonight. When the call ended, he placed the phone on the table as though it had become heavier. They are taking me off the account, he said, and the partnership review is suspended. Grace reached toward him but stopped before touching his arm. I am sorry, she said. So am I. He looked at me. Is this what you wanted? No. It is what happened. Yes, because of what you chose before tonight. He flinched, but he did not argue. Then Grace opened her handbag and removed a folder I had not seen. There is one more thing, she said. Matthew stared at her. What now? She slid a printed sponsorship deck across the table. On the second page was a photograph of me standing in front of the training center. Beneath it, a sentence claimed that the Callahan family had formally endorsed Matthew's firm as the center's strategic partner. Where did you get this, I asked. It was attached to an email sent to 3 potential sponsors, Grace said. I found it this afternoon. Matthew looked stunned. I never approved that word. Did you approve using the photograph, she asked. He looked down. Yes. The room changed around that answer. The problem was larger than one exaggerated email to Martha. Matthew had allowed his firm to build a sales story around my reputation, then ignored language that turned an assumption into an endorsement. It was not a crime, but it could make donors question whether the center's contracts were being steered through family influence. Call David back, I said. Tell him the sponsorship deck must be corrected tonight. Matthew did. This time his voice did not tremble. He stated exactly what he had authorized, exactly what he had not, and exactly what needed to be withdrawn. Afterward, he sent Martha a written statement, taking responsibility and confirming that I had never supported the proposal. He copied the board's legal counsel and asked that no consideration be given to his firm. When he finished, nearly an hour had passed. The brass key still rested between us. Matthew looked at it then, at the paper listing the 12-week volunteer period. I came here thinking you were taking something from me, he said. I did not understand that I had been using something that was never mine. He signed the page. I did not hug him. He did not ask me to. But for the first time since the ceremony, neither of us was hiding behind what we hoped the other would understand. The repair had begun, but trust had not yet returned. Matthew began his first carrying no briefcase. Martha met him in the lobby and handed him a temporary badge that read, "Volunteer." He looked at it longer than necessary. "No title," he asked. "Not yet," she said. "Today, you help wherever the center needs you." His first assignment was not strategic planning. It was organizing donated safety glasses, checking inventory sheets, and helping Isaiah prepare a resume for an electrical apprenticeship interview. Matthew struggled at first. He was used to rooms where people listened because of his position. At the center, teenagers interrupted him, misspelled words, and asked questions he could not answer with a presentation slide. Twice he reached for his phone during a conversation. Twice he caught himself and put it away. I watched from the workshop doorway, but did not step in. A promise to change means little if someone is constantly protected from the discomfort of changing. At the end of the day, Matthew approached me. "I am sorry," he said. "For the ceremony, the email, all of it. I believe you are sorry." Relief crossed his face too soon. But an apology is not the same as restored trust. I continued. "I know." This time he did not argue. Over the next several weeks he kept returning. He helped students build simple budgets, practiced interview questions with them, and created a list of local employers willing to offer paid placements. He made mistakes. During one workshop, he spoke for 20 minutes about professional branding until a student asked, "Can you just show us how to answer when they ask why we want the job?" Matthew stopped, laughed at himself, and started over. Grace began volunteering too, though not beside him every time. She had experience writing grant applications and helped Martha prepare a modest request for new welding equipment. She refused to put Matthew's firm anywhere in the paperwork. She also told me that she and Matthew had begun seeing a marriage counselor. We got too good at managing pressure and too bad at telling each other the truth, she said. I respected that she did not blame him for everything or pretend she had no part in their choices. Noah kept a careful distance during the first weeks. He answered questions when Matthew asked, but he did not supervise him or make a show of forgiveness. One evening, I found the two of them repairing a damaged tool cabinet. Their conversation was stiff, but civil. Matthew admitted he had resented Noah for years. Noah tightened a hinge and said, "I never wanted your place. I had my own father, and I miss him every day." Matthew looked down. I know that now. By the 8th week, Matthew was coming, even when I was not there. That mattered more than any speech. He called me every Sunday not to ask about the advisory position, but to ask whether I wanted breakfast. Sometimes I said yes. Sometimes I said I had other plans. He accepted both answers. At the end of 12 weeks, Martha scheduled the council's review. Before the meeting, she asked whether I intended to vote. "No," I said. "If he is considered, it must be because of what he has done here, not because I am his father." Through the conference room glass, I saw Matthew waiting alone in the hallway. For once, he had shown up without knowing whether anything would be given back. The council meeting lasted less than an hour, but Matthew waited in the hallway as though it might decide his future. I stayed in the workshop with Noah and 3 students repairing a training motor because I had told Martha I would not vote or join the discussion. "You are pretending not to be nervous," Noah said. "I am retired. I have perfected pretending." He smiled, then returned to the wiring diagram. When the conference room door opened, Martha called Matthew inside. 10 minutes later, he came out holding a folder. He did not smile, but he did not look defeated either. "They offered me a 6-month probationary seat," he said. "No contract for the firm, no authority over vendors, and every potential conflict has to be disclosed in writing. Can you accept that?" I asked. "Yes." He looked toward Noah. They also asked him to coordinate the student mentor program. Noah raised his eyebrows. They did. Matthew nodded. Martha said, "Your school experience makes you the obvious choice." For a moment, I watched both men waiting for the old competition to return. It did not. Matthew extended his hand. "Congratulations." Noah shook it. "You too." That small exchange mattered more to me than the council's decision. A week later, Matthew called and asked whether I still had the aluminum fishing boat behind my garage. "It has not touched water in 4 years," I said. "Then maybe we should find out why." Saturday morning, he arrived with coffee, 2 new trailer lights, and no agenda. We spent 3 hours replacing cracked wiring and cleaning old fuel from the motor. At first, we talked only about tools. Then Matthew said, "I used to think making partner was the only proof that I had become someone you could respect." I set down the wrench. "You became someone I respected a long time ago." He looked at me. "You never said that." I know. The words hurt because they were true. I thought paying for college, helping with the house, and fixing whatever went wrong said it for me. "It said you loved me," he replied. "It did not always say you knew me." I nodded. "That is fair." He did not use my admission to excuse himself. "And I used your silence as permission to stop trying." That is mine. We sat on the overturned boat for a while, listening to traffic beyond the fence. Nothing between us was magically repaired, but something had become honest. Over the next 2 months, Matthew continued coming to the center after the probationary appointment began. He helped apprentices prepare for interviews, connected 2 graduates with employers, and stayed late once to rewrite a grant budget with Grace after a sponsor requested changes. He never asked whether the brass key was still meant for him. Grace kept volunteering, and their counseling continued. Some weeks they seemed closer. Other weeks they left in separate cars. Change, I learned, is rarely a straight line. Noah brought his students to the center every Thursday, and Matthew began helping them practice business presentations for their repair projects. The first time I saw them teaching together, I realized neither man was standing in the other's place. They were building different parts of the same bridge. At the end of Matthew's 6th month, Martha scheduled a public welcome for the new apprentice class. The night before, I took the brass key from my desk drawer. I finally knew what I wanted to do with it, but not in the way I had once planned. 6 months after Matthew began volunteering, the South Harbor Apprenticeship Center welcomed its 2nd class. There were no television cameras, surprise awards, or speeches about redemption. Parents carried folders, students compared schedules, and instructors answered questions about boots bus routes and placement hours. I arrived early and found Matthew at a folding table helping a mother complete a tuition assistance form. There was no badge advertising his counsel role, and no mention of his firm. Across the room, Noah checked toolkits with students from his high school. He caught my eye, nodded, then returned to showing a boy how to record missing equipment without blaming whoever packed the box. Neither man was performing for me. That was how I knew the change was real. Martha joined me beside the workshop doors. "They have both been here since 7, she said. Matthew asked if we needed help before anyone told him where to stand. I reached into my coat pocket and closed my hand around the brass key. For months, I had imagined giving it to one son or the other, as though trust were a prize that could belong to only one person. I finally understood the key had never been valuable because of who held it. It mattered because of the door it once opened. Before the welcome program, I asked Matthew and Noah to meet me inside the original electrical lab. A glass case had been mounted beside the entrance. Beneath it was a metal plate engraved with one sentence: "The first door opened for us. Our responsibility is to hold it open for whoever comes next." Matthew read it slowly. Noah looked at the key in my palm. "You are not giving it to either of us," he said. "No," I replied. "I am trusting both of you to protect what it represents." Together, they lifted the glass while I placed the key inside. Matthew tightened the final screw. Noah checked the level and adjusted it. It was ordinary teamwork that would never become a headline, and I was grateful for that. When we entered the auditorium, I noticed the front row first. 6 months earlier, Matthew's chair had remained empty, while Noah sat in his own place 2 rows behind. This time, 2 name cards waited beside mine. Matthew was already seated when I reached the row. Noah sat on my other side. No one had replaced anyone. Matthew stood and moved aside so I could pass. "I wanted to be early this time," he said. "Then stay," I answered. He smiled, but the words were not only about that morning. During the program, Matthew spoke briefly about honest partnerships and disclosed his relationship to me before discussing the council's work. Noah introduced the student mentors and gave the attention back to them. Afterward, we stayed to stack chairs. Grace joined us, carrying leftover sandwiches to the staff room. Nothing about my family was perfect. Matthew and I still had conversations that ended awkwardly. Trust returned in small pieces, and some pieces took longer than others. But he kept showing up after the embarrassment faded, after probation ended, and after there was nothing left to win. That was what changed everything. Family is revealed by who keeps returning, who tells the truth when it costs them, and who stays long enough to hold the door open. Do you believe Matthew earned his second chance? Tell me where you stand and share this story with someone who may still have time to come home before it is too late.